welcome. Thank you. I'm going to lead you in a little prayer before we begin. Okay, in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. O Mother Cabrini, woman after God's own heart, universal patroness of migrants, for whom this world, too small a world, held lands for boundless work, helping migrants find true integration into new cultures, doing all things in God who strengthens us. Be for us now, with these your myriad of migrants, voice, guardian, advocate, mother. Bring the good news of the gospel to all humanity. Proclaim the love and mercy of God. Breathe life, truth, and hope, justice, peace, and communion, wheresoever those values are wanting. Inspire us with the love of the heart of Jesus. Then, at the end, guide the migrant soul and bring all safe to God. Amen.
My name is Jerry Rose. Am I on? Okay. And I'm part of the social justice team along with Christy and a few other folks that are here. And I want to thank you for your presence this evening. It's a great turnout. And tonight we will go for approximately 45 minutes. And then we'll go for about a 15-minute break and have some refreshments and chat a little bit, maybe do some questions or whatever. And then we'll come back and do another 30 minutes, okay? Father Wayne Dziekan is a vicar from the Hispanic Ministry in Gaylord, Michigan, the Diocese of Gaylord. He lives in Traverse City, and we're very, very happy to have him and grateful for him. He's pretty much an expert, I believe. I hope I'm not going too far with this, but I think he's going to give us at least some understanding and a Catholic response, okay, to what's going on a little bit. Here's Father.
Great. I have Jesus. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And thank you for coming out on such a wonderful evening. I began to think as I was driving down, enjoying the sunshine and the fall colors, I'm like, people won't want to come and sit inside on an evening like this. So it's really good to see all of you here. You are lucky with the schedule that Jerry just mentioned to you because to be honest with you, I have not done one of these presentations for several years. I used to do them quite often, but back then I required 3 hours for each presentation. And there were some groups that scheduled and they were, 3 hours, great. And there were other groups that were like, no. Our people are not going to sit there for 3 hours. And I'm like, I guarantee you they will. No, they're not. I guarantee you they will. And you know what? I never had anybody walk out. Only, there were people who would come up to me and say, I have to leave in a half hour. That's the only time I have. I said, you're fine, don't worry. But the thing is, it's an interesting topic and a very confusing topic and a very contentious topic. So there's a lot to talk about. So obviously, you're not going to be going home knowing everything there is to know about immigration. I don't know everything there is to know about immigration. But as Jerry mentioned, I am the vicar for Hispanic Ministry for the Diocese of Gaylord. I have a very unusual job. I don't run a parish. The vast majority of my work is on the street with the migrant community, one-on-one with people or with families. The major part of my work in that realm is probably connected to immigration law. I am not a lawyer. I want to make that clear, all right? I am not a lawyer. I work with lawyers and at one time began pursuing becoming an immigration lawyer and quickly found out, I realized that that's not where God was calling me. So I'm kind of like the connection when people are lost and confused and don't even know what to ask a lawyer, or a lawyer may not know how to talk to that person. And so I'm that connector, I'm that catalyst. And I love doing that. And then the number two work within that is now housing, trying to find housing. Because as you all know, housing is very, very difficult everywhere. And then I also am co-founder of a small nonprofit in Traverse City called the Justice and Peace Advocacy Center, JPAC for short. And that nonprofit is kind of like an extension of the work that I do for the Diocese of Gaylord. And it more focuses on medical assistance, medical interpretation, and our the other co-founder, Gladys Munoz, is a certified medical interpreter. So she takes care of all that part. If there's anything in the education system, that goes through her. So I refer clients to her. She refers clients to me for immigration and housing, and we go forward like that. She and I have also taken groups to the border. I think we did 13 different immersions at the, most were at the Mexican border. One was in Puerto Rico, which is also a border territory. And half of an immersion was in Detroit, which of course is a border territory as well. And as a hobby, one of my hobbies is that I work with coffee farmers and I run microfinance projects, and currently have projects going in Bolivia. I just got back from Bolivia a month ago, and in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And both of those places, all the projects in both countries are connected through Higher Grounds Roasting Company in Traverse City, which is a 100% organic, fair trade coffee roaster. The owner and I are really good friends, and we have more plans in the future as well. So that's kind of like a summary of where my tentacles go, okay? Some of you submitted questions. The questions that were sent to me by Jerry from you are very good. And to be honest with you, I could do nothing more than go through those questions and we'd fill up our time, okay? But I want to say a little bit as a precursor to all that. And when I say a little bit, I hope I can fit it in the first 45 minutes. The immigration system in the US, some say, is broken. I used to say that. And then one time I was on a panel, and a friend of mine who's an immigration lawyer was next to me at the front table, and so I spoke right before him. And I said to the crowd, okay, the immigration system is broken, and blah, 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 blah. And then it came to him, and he said, well, I disagree with Father Wayne. And I'm like, we're friends. He never said that to me. And he says, not broken. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do. Okay? It's racist. It's pushing people away who have dark skin. And it has been set up to be that way. It's been put together piecemeal over very many years. But if we look back at the history of the immigration system in the US, it came to be when people with non-white skin color were coming into the US to take jobs that nobody else would fill, even 100 years ago and so forth, okay? And so that's what we have. And the US Conference of Catholic Bishops has been very strongly fighting for decades, at least on the order of 30 years now, for comprehensive immigration reform. What is comprehensive immigration reform? It's reforming the whole immigration system. And not only the immigration system, but even reforming the way the US does treaties with other countries. Because very often we'll tell a country, okay, here's what we'll do for you, but in return, you will do this and this, which typically, gives us a financial edge somehow or other. And it penalizes that country, which creates problems internally, eventually causing people to have to leave in order to survive. We do that over and over. So comprehensive immigration reform will actually be global in scope. Global. That is the only thing that's going to cure this whole immigration mess that causes so much contention in our world and in our country. We're no different here. What we're experiencing is happening in a lot of countries. It's a global phenomenon, and the reason is because of what I just told you, the way we are all connected and the way richer, powerful countries take advantage of poorer, less powerful countries. And again, that increases the problems in their home country when eventually they have to leave. So if anyone, one of the questions came like, what do we tell people that are all angry about immigration and all that? Well, that's a really good question. It's a really tough one to answer. But one of the things that you could do is talk about comprehensive immigration reform. Speaking from experience, when you say that, some people are going to mock you and they will laugh at you. They will tell you, get real, it's never going to happen, and all that. We came really close a couple of times in the last 15-ish years, but it never took root. It never happened. It can be done. But what we have to, our political system is a whole other thing now, completely haywire. So I don't expect that comprehensive immigration reform is going to happen in the foreseeable future, unfortunately. And who suffers? The poor. Okay. And I have not yet read Pope Leo's new encyclical, God Loves You, but at the core of it is that if you're looking for God, look in the poor. That's where you will find God. And that's basically how we ought to do immigration policy. The title of this event had to do like immigration through the eyes of Christ. This is why, all right? Because unless we look at the immigrant with the eyes of Christ, the eyes of love, we're never going to get anywhere. Never going to get anywhere. And right away, I've been doing this work for over 20 years, so I know a lot of people say, but Father Wayne, they're illegal. Yeah. The Catholic response would be, so what? So what? And the reason that's a Catholic response is because not only Catholic, but I am connected to a lot of people who in some way or other do share in the work that I do. They're either immigration lawyers or they're advocates. I'm an advocate, of trying to help the immigrant population however I can. They know whether or not they're Christian, the immigration system is so messed up that people, the vast majority of people who are in the country illegally would jump at any chance they had to make themselves legal, to have legal status. They would jump. How much? How much? Tell me how much. And why don't they do it? There's no path. There's no path. I have tons of clients, people that I serve, I call them clients. And I have tons of clients that are in that position, that they would do anything, that there's no path for them to do it. Another ingredient in comprehensive immigration reform. Eliminate that situation so that if people want, to go through the process, then create that process so that they have a path, so that they can have legal presence and work toward it. They'd be happy to do that. And you keep hearing the angry voices saying just the opposite. They're coming here to take our jobs. They're coming in here to bring drugs. Not the people I work with, so I don't know where all those people are going. The people that I work with are just so filled with love and so filled with joy and patience and so forth. They teach me, because I get all frustrated and overwhelmed, and they're not. They're filled with hope. And we hear, in the Catholic Church, we keep hearing, we are a people of hope, we are a people of hope, a people of hope. I get to points where I lose hope. They have hope. So they teach me that over and over again. I have things running through my mind here. A couple of other topics to just give to you a bit. Another thing, so we hear today and have heard for many years that people who are in the country without legal presence are criminals. They're not. If they have, broken a criminal law and have attacked someone, robbed a bank, blah, 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 yeah, then they're a criminal if they're found guilty. But just because they're here without legal presence, according to the law, they are not a criminal. So that's another way that you could talk to people who are upset. Say, wait a minute, according to the law, they're not criminals. So the USCCB, these sheets that I have in my hand are from the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, USCCB. And they even say in their sheet here, what I'm going to tell you, and I include it in every presentation I give on the topic, people who are here without legal presence are guilty of a civil infraction. Of civil infraction. It's hard to make a comparison in a non-immigration setting because of the way the laws are, but they even use the example here. It's kind of like if a U.S. citizen goes through a stoplight. It's that kind of sort of that level of offense, okay? It's not a criminal offense, and yet we are treating them like criminals. Perhaps now more than ever, but it's not the first time. And I can tell you all kinds of stories about having to confront local law enforcement leadership because of what was going on in our community up in northern Michigan between them and Border Patrol years ago. Okay, so it's been, again, I could tell you a lot of stories, but there's no point here. The point is that these issues have been around for a long time, that people have been suffering for a long time, and we still don't get it. Because they're a group of people that can be so easily manipulated for profit, either financial profit, which happens a lot, or political profit, which happens a lot. And both those things have happened for a long, long time. They're a vulnerable population. And what does the Catholic Church say, those of you especially on the Social Justice Committee, what does Catholic social teaching tell us if you want to evaluate how any given society is doing? Where do you look? How are they treating the poor? How are they treating the most vulnerable? How are the most vulnerable in that population, whatever it is, how are the most vulnerable doing? And if they're not doing well, you got a problem. In your society, you have a problem in your society. And I've been reading from blurbs coming up on my phone even today and yesterday from Pope Leo. He's beginning to get down and dirty into all this stuff, and he's beginning to name these things. You know, that if you don't have this, you have a sick society. Okay, this comes from Catholic social teaching. He will get blamed for having an opinion that is, you know, that happens all the time. Father Wayne, that's your opinion. This is Catholic teaching. Okay? We can go to documents where it says all this stuff. Okay. So if someone is found, you know, again, I'm in my mind, I'm doing circles in my mind here. So let me just say, you know, there's a whole lot from my perspective and my experience and from Catholic social doctrine. There's a whole lot in favor of helping people who do not have status. They're up against a lot. And even as much as possible, trying to see, is there a way that they can get their foot in the door? For many people, they can't, but sometimes we get lucky and we find a way. But it's tough. So that's how you know, when people are angry, why don't they get in? There is no line. Why don't they get in line? There is no line. Why don't they get their papers together? They can't. Okay, so just keep that in mind. The Catholic Church does not say this is what immigration reform should look like. Bam, 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 bam. No. That's the job of politicians. The Catholic Church does have the moral, ethical structure, okay? And in fact, there is on the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops website, the Catholic Church's position on immigration reform. And it lays out a number of general ideas. Earned legalization, that if someone is here working, they should be able to earn the ability to stay here legally. We don't have that. That's why the Catholic Church struggles with work visas. You know, these, I know up north we have a lot, I'm sure you have them here too, the H-1A and H-2A work visas where you know, the farm workers get that. And even people working in hotels, resorts, they get that. We only want their work. We don't want them as a person. You work here, when your time is up, you better get back. That's how we treat them. The Catholic Church has an issue with that, and it should, okay? That's another thing that you could bring up to people who are angry, okay? There should be a merit system so that their labor can earn them a foot in the door. And right now, again, that does not happen. A future worker program, a program to anticipate work that is needed. Any program should include workplace protections, living wage levels, safeguards against the displacement of U.S. workers, and family unity. Right now, our immigration law doesn't give a hoot about family unity, and especially when ICE is rounding up people and separating families left and right violently and suddenly, and shipping people off to other countries. Okay, all of that is deadly wrong. This is deadly wrong. Family-based immigration reform. Mexico, okay, our next door neighbor, big country, a wonderful country. I love going to Mexico, and I do both, going to the big tourist areas, and I go to places that are way in the mountains where you don't see tourists forever. And Mexico is a beautiful, beautiful country, and the people and the cultures, plural, the food, of course. You know, if a Mexican farm worker If a campesino, a Mexican peasant, wants to come and work in the U.S., I get calls from people in Mexico, and they're like, Father Wayne, can you find me a job there? Get me a work permit. No. Okay. That, to go more into detail, would take a long time, but that person has to find an employer in the U.S. So that employer will apply for that man or woman by name. Now, can you imagine how difficult that is? And there's a whole big and expensive process that employer then would have to go through before he would be able to bring that worker here. And again, it would only be to work because we only want the labor, we don't want the person. So, and then even people who are here that petition for their family members, they have legal presence and they petition for a close family member. You know how long they have to wait? What? 25, 30-ish years. Can you imagine? Yep. So that's how bad the system is. And can you imagine, in 30 years, you think of your own family? What happens in 30 years? A lot, Whoosh. And their final, well, they have a couple. Addressing root causes of immigration, which goes with that comprehensive immigration reform. I've already alluded to that before, that historically, our country and others, we do things with poor nations that makes things even worse for the people at home, pushing them out. We only hear the angry voices saying, there are things attracting the people here. They want to make more money, they want this, they want that. Well, who doesn't want to make more money, all right? Especially when you need to feed your kids and you can't. But there's also push factors, things that push them from home. Could be gang violence, it could be drugs, illegal arms. Where do the illegal arms come from? What? They come from the U.S. You bet your dollars. We're the ones making money on the arms that we're selling illegally to the drug lords and so forth. And the drugs come here. We're pointing fingers, or politicians point fingers at those people in Mexico and Colombia and you name the country. It's their fault that we have so many drugs here. What do you think of that line? No, there's a market. Who's buying the drugs? Who's consuming the drugs? We are. So until we change that, that's never going to stop. It's our problem. That's not their problem. Okay? Birthright citizenship. We've been hearing a lot about that lately, haven't we? Okay. Just so you know that the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops has a long brief, an issue brief. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 pages long on that topic. And they say very clearly, they give all the reasons, and they say, we strongly, irrevocably support birthright citizenship. It should not even be an issue. So just so you know that, okay? Meaning that the Catholic Church is saying that the way we've been doing it all these years, if someone is born in the U.S., they're a U.S. citizen, period. The Catholic Church is supporting that, hands down. So again, any angry people, you could try kindly to say, well, the Catholic Church, And again, people will still ridicule you for that. I get ridiculed all the time for that. But people ought to know what the Catholic Church stands for. And by the way, jumping ahead to action items, what can I do about all this? educate yourself. You're doing that right now. You're here. Keep it up. There's a sheet with a few websites that you could explore. There's a lot on those websites. Take the time, read it, learn it, and follow it. And you will be surprised what you will learn. You know, it might be overwhelming at first. You know, immigration is a big, complex topic, and you'll feel overwhelmed. Everyone does. I did. But all you do is a little step every day or every other day. You do a little bit of reading, a little bit. After a couple of months, you're going to say, "Oh my gosh, did I learn a lot?" Okay, you're never going to know it all, but you will learn a lot. So that's an important action step, because then you can talk to other people and you could help clarify what is really correct and what is not. Okay, we only have a little bit of time before our break. A lot of this I've already covered. People who are in the Social Justice Committee in particular, I'm talking to you now with a question, but others as well. The 2 feet of Catholic social action. Have you ever heard of that? 2 feet of Catholic social action. 1 foot is charity. Charity, okay. And the other foot is justice. Okay. Charity and justice. Catholics are really good at charity. We're really good at donating, helping. You know, if fire somewhere, we help. Here's shelter, here's for building a new home. We excel at charity. Praise the Lord. I'm not sure we're all that great with justice. What is that? Working on the root causes of problems. Okay? So, not only supporting the local food pantry or whatever, which we always have to do, especially now more than ever. But why do people keep ending up in that position? What's going on? What's going on? And when we ask those questions, that's where we find where the poor, the vulnerable are not doing well. Why? And then we try to fix it. How do we begin to fix it? Political level, political involvement. Catholic social doctrine of the Roman Catholic Church says that is the job of the laity, to get involved in the political process and change the world according to Catholic guidelines. You're not going to always get all that, no, but as best you can. Okay, and that's the job of the laity. I'm stunned how often I will hear from people if I give a homily, you know, the Gospels, you know, I always connect to something. But I'll give a homily and somebody afterwards say, "Father, I don't want to hear politics in church." And I'm like, well, then don't come. Because Catholic social doctrine says that that's where we're supposed to make the gospel happen. We're supposed to, not partisan, okay, but in the world of politics, okay, policies. We have to work for policies. We have to change policies. And the whole immigration system has to change because it's unjust. We should follow the law. All the immigrants should follow the law. But the law is unjust. So we have to change it, you see? Because no law is good if it's causing harm to people and it's breaking families and beating people down. No, change the law. That's justice. Are we at break time yet, Jerry? Wow. All right. I'm never ahead of schedule. Question, response in these 5-6 minutes. Yeah. Go for it. That's key right there. Okay? Peaceful. And but giving witness, it's a form of public witness, okay? But peaceful. The church never promotes violence because of the dignity of the human person, okay? So no one deserves to be treated violently. And that by violently, I could be talking about physical violence, I could be talking about emotional violence, you know, calling people names, putting them down, which is, of course, all in domestic violence, isn't it? Okay? But it's all against the dignity of the human person. So protest is great. Peaceful. Has to be peaceful. And I've been loving seeing these videos of the confrontations of the against ICE, especially in Portland, where they came out with this big frog costume, you know, and I think there was a rubber ducky and all that, and they're just standing there. And it shows how ridiculous the whole thing is. And you see, they're global. They're not doing anything, they're not saying anything, and they're a global phenomenon because of the power of their witness. That's creativity, okay? And it's very effective.
But those demonstrations also turned violent with fires and...
Some did, and that's unfortunate, okay? And that's the thing we always have to be careful of.
that takes away from it.
Exactly. It takes away from the impact of the peaceful thing. And I exactly had that on a smaller scale in Traverse City, agreeing to be, you know, in peaceful protests along Grandview Parkway, along the bay. And we all agreed that we were going to stand there, we would hold our signs, and we wouldn't do anything nasty. We wouldn't even wave because people could misinterpret that. And some people in the group weren't happy with that. And they, you know, began, so I stopped joining those groups because I don't want to be a part of that. I can't. So, but yeah, did someone back there have a question or something? When I talked about the people in the costumes in Portland, like the frog costume, and I was speaking favorably of that, and then the lady brought up that, but some of those, they turned violent, and that takes away from the benefit of the others. So that's how important it is that everybody be peaceful. Yeah.
I've read that for every person who makes it to the United States, 30 people are born. How can the United States, if that's true, how can the United States accept all those people into the country without destroying them?
Have you given birth to 30 people? Oh, in the home country. I misunderstood your question. Well, I've never heard anybody saying that we want to welcome entire populations of entire countries. In fact, we want to minimize the number of people who feel the need to have to flee here with comprehensive immigration reform. Remember, it would be working on improving the conditions in the home country so people will stay there because they would rather be home, okay? And just like us here, you know, we would rather remain here. But if you can no longer feed your kids and there's violence happening and blah, 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 then people say, I have no other option. I have to get out of here. So we want to make it better there. In fact, that coffee microfinance projects, those things that I mentioned to you in Bolivia and Congo, that's exactly the point, is to help those farmers in those poor places. And Congo has all kinds of violence. Oh my gosh. I get pictures of it from local people. And but to help soften the economic situation so that they can survive and they can remain there. So that's what we're all working for. So, okay, let me take one and then we'll, yep.
There seems to be a political need in those countries for these people to stay oppressed because they're getting rich off their backs. So you're fighting an uphill battle trying to make their lives better because the politicians there, many of whom are corrupt, want that money.
You're absolutely right. And on the other hand, I did quickly say a bit earlier, over the decades, we and other countries have encouraged that, okay, and manipulated that. We're doing it right now. And that, with comprehensive immigration reform, that would stop.
Talk louder. Okay. Okay. My question, can everybody hear me now? My question is the way people are acting towards Border Patrol and ICE right now. And this is a personal question for me because my brother has had threats. He is a Border Patrol agent. My nephews have had threats against their lives. And so this is just a really hot topic for me. And what do we talk about? How do we stop the violence towards people who are just trying to do their job that they were hired to do?
Great question. And another part of it that Anita asked is, like I'm going in and out. All right, I got a bit. Because she feels that under the Biden administration, the people were just like, okay, come in, you know. And some people call that an open border. She cited an example where Border Patrol agent, your brother, in fact, had to give, you know, this, okay, come on, okay, come in. And you see, this is a complicated topic, okay? And she also had before mentioned violence. She had personally experienced that down at the southern border from people who are coming in. That happens, yep. So I feel it's important that that be a part of our conversation because I don't want that we go from here thinking that, you know, just because a person is from another country, they're an immigrant here, a migrant, whatever, that they're a saint, okay? No, we're all sinners for one, and in any population, you're going to have a criminal element. That's true of priests, it's true of law enforcement, it's true of whatever group you want to mention, you're going to have a criminal element, okay? That's human nature. So yeah, there's going to be all that happening at the border as well, and that's wrong. And the animosity toward the law enforcement agents, that's a really tough one. You know, I briefly mentioned earlier, even up in my area in Traverse City, I had to call together law enforcement heads from local law enforcement, state police, from a couple of different sheriff's departments to all sit down around the table trying to do a friendly, loving dialogue, and it did not go well, okay? So it's tough. And I just, you know, I hear your pain. I'm sorry for the oppression, you know, even against your family members and such. But right now, even they are being manipulated. You know, with this war in the country and all this kind of thing. We don't want that. And they're the face of it. It's hard. But here's where we come right back to what we said earlier. Non-violent, okay? So no matter what other people do, we do not want to be violent. And we try to spread that attitude as best we can, okay? So I'm not giving you much of an answer, but I want to acknowledge the question. Yeah. Thank you. And Anita said she had to leave, so thank you.
Okay, you're speaking. Okay.
I'll repeat.
I think fear is a big factor
Yeah.
on all levels,
Mhm.
in the ICE agents, in the, all the people who are the soldiers, everybody who's involved, all levels, there's a big level of fear.
Mhm.
And fear causes people to go into self-preservation, which means anger, and it means, violence and all sorts of things. So what we have to fight is get ourselves out of that fight, flight, or freeze and into the higher centers of our brain so that we can act in rational ways and we can act in peaceful ways.
Right.
And that's hard to do.
Right. So to repeat, fear is at the heart. So agents, law enforcement have fear. The people that they're trying to control or trying to, what's a better word, to protect. They're fearful. They don't know how the law enforcement is going to treat them. Law enforcement doesn't, blah, blah, blah. And that fear then, creates anger, creates striking out, all that kind of thing. And so the point was that we need to be more mindful, of the fear that we have. And remember, the person in front of us is a human being, and try to treat them that way. Yeah.
There needs to be education and training for those who are put into these jobs.
Yep.
Instead of just hiring and going. And that's a huge, I
Yep.
think that's a huge issue.
There has to be proper training for people. And you were talking about law enforcement in particular. Yeah, and how to de-escalate. And that's very true. A little story. 2 weeks ago, I got a call at 11:15 p.m. on a Saturday night from one of my clients I've been working with for a long time, who got stopped by a police officer. And there was a thing going on that I even talked, I said, pass the phone to the officer, and I talked to the officer, and I said, no, here's the situation that you're experiencing with her. The paper she's showing you, that's all valid. She's not driving illegally. It's all about, well, I never heard of that, the officer said. And it was a matter of a ticket. Okay, we didn't go beyond that, but I ended up talking to the sheriff, who acknowledged that, yep, this person's been an officer for many years, but not on the street. And they never had that part of the training. You see? So, and we're hearing, I don't know, but we've been hearing about a lot of recruitment for new ICE agents, new Border Patrol agents. They're suddenly all out on the street. Where are they coming from? What kind of training have they had? We don't know that. And so that adds to that the fear and the misbehavior that comes out so often. It's a mess, okay? The bottom line is it's a mess right now, but we are people of hope.
You say our immigration system is broken. What happened to it? This country was built on immigrants. We're all descendants of immigrants. We're not immigrants ourselves. My dad came here when he was 15 years old. Came here, went to Ellis Island, went to school, learned the language, and got citizenship. Why can't they do that now?
Because way back, why? So I mentioned that the immigration system is broken, and yet our country was founded on immigrants, and his ancestors, father, grandfather, or whatever, had come in and gone through the system, got citizenship, learned the language. Why can't that happen now? Because it's all different. The laws that we have now did not exist in those days. There was nothing. In 1994, before 1993, there was no border wall between the U.S. and Mexico. Okay, that's one. Okay, and so my answer is that back then, you could do that. You came in, went through inspection, and then you could go through a system of different. They had certain things on the books that you could do, and it was very easy to enter the country and become a citizen eventually, but not now. That's all changed, and it keeps changing. The immigration system is like a living animal, just like the border between the U.S. and Mexico is a living thing. It changes a lot, and it would take a long time to describe that, but even physically it changes. There are where's where I went, like a gully that I've seen this with my own eyes right at the border in Arizona at the border with Mexico. There's these dry gullies where at that time, this was 20 years ago, the government, the federal US government had built a wall in a certain section because a lot of people were coming through. And in the gully, they had put steel beams vertically into the bed of the gully to hold a wall there in place. And the steel beams were bent by the water. The steel beams that they had put in were all bent from the force of the water and rocks and everything that's carried along. And so that's part of what I'm saying. The riverbeds change. I'm thinking myself into a circle here, and I'm getting lost in the process. I think I'll end it there, but that's not a very good answer, but it's the only thing I can do for right now. The whole thing is different. Go ahead. What do you want to ask?
You say these immigrants, most of these immigrants are not criminals, but they broke the law when they crossed the border. So what are they? What are they doing?
As I said, I said they're not criminals, but they broke the law when they entered. Again, and you're right, but that doesn't make them a criminal because they didn't break any criminal law. Again, it's a civil infraction. It's immigration law. It's a different category, different court than criminal law even. So we're not encouraging people to break the law, but we're encouraging that we have laws that can handle the reality of what the market needs. Our laws, our immigration laws, do not even reflect what our US businesses require. Our immigration law doesn't give our businesses what they want, farmers what they want. The immigration law is way out of whack with all of that. So everybody's suffering. The employers are suffering, producing food, suffering, the workers suffering because of the system. And people, and this is true for decades, I'm going to say, not just now, politicians very often are making money off of this whole thing. They're making money off of it. They've been making money off of it, and that's why it's not changing. Money is the root of all evil. And that's also true in the whole world of immigration. Someone else. Yep.
You mentioned at the beginning that in the last 15 years, there have been points that we've been close to getting like a immigration globally. Can you speak to that?
Not globally, but within the U.S., in Congress, in other words, in the U.S. government. They were coming close to making a foundational agreement. It happened 2 or even 3 times, I don't recall right now. None of them were perfect, but all the immigration advocates, or most, acknowledged that it was a great place to begin. Get this out there and then build on it, okay? No, it wasn't global. It was within the US for restructuring the immigration system. Does that help? I wouldn't be able, it'd be way too much for now. I wouldn't be able, I'd have to look that up, or you could Google, and I'm sure that you'll find out. Senator, he's now dead. He was a war hero, decorated war hero, Vietnam prison. McCain. He was part to one of them. So you can Google Senator McCain, and he had a Democratic counterpart. They had a McCain, and I don't even remember the Democratic senator. They had a McCain don't deal. That was one of those 2 or 3 deals. So you could Google that and learn more. Okay. Yeah. Ah, thank you. That's where I got lost, and I said circular. Thank you. Wow, you're paying attention. Yeah, and so the question is, why, after 1993, was there suddenly a border wall? Does anybody know the answer to that? Something went into effect. The North American Free Trade Agreement went into effect on January 1 of 1994. And so the US government began, before that date, putting the border wall. Why? Because it knew that with the implementation of NAFTA, okay, and the free trade agreement that allowed money to freely flow from the US to Mexico, from Mexico to the US. It allowed product or parts, truck parts, car parts, completed trucks, completed cars to flow. But workers, keep them where they belong. Yeah. Yep. Again, racism thing. Okay, you have to keep that in mind. So that's when the border wall began. 1994, January 1, 1994. What else happened on that date in Mexico? The opposite end of Mexico, the southern end. In Chiapas state, have you ever heard of the Zapatistas? They are indigenous people. They are a cultural group and now a political group. You don't hear about them very much right now, but if you Google them, Zapatista beginning with a Z, they rebelled. They did a rebellion in San Cristobal de las Casas, the capital of Chiapas State, Mexico, on January 1, 1994, for the same reason, the implementation of NAFTA, because they knew that it was a death knell for the poor of Mexico. Now, sadly, at that point, they decided to arm themselves, and they invaded the city of San Cristobal de las Casas, which is a beautiful city. It's one of two cities in Latin America where I could live there. I'd love it. But again, they decided for a while to be violent, and people died. And they later gave up arms, and at that point they cut like a silhouette of a gun out of wood, and they walked with that. And that way it was a symbol, but they wouldn't hurt anybody. And you see a thing with violence, you have to look for violence. Don't discount it right away. Okay, I'm saying kind of a delicate thing here, and it can cause confusion. When somebody gets violent, it often means that they're so frustrated, so oppressed, so fed up that they have no other option. That's what you got to look for. So, do you punish the violence and do retribution? Do you understand the violence? You think it's a tough question. I think maybe it's everything, all that. But you have to ask the question, why? Why? Now, I think it was you asked me that question during the break. Boy, that was a powerful break time. Maybe we should do another break. Always ask the question, why? I want to tell you a little story. One of our bishops, a bishop that ordained me a priest, Patrick Cooney of the Diocese of Gaylord. So you know him, and others know him, yep. So he told me one time that, he says, you know what, Wayne, my grandmother always, no matter what I did, what I said, she said, why? Why? Why did you do that? And he says, it was so effective to me growing up when I had to explain why I did things, that he says, now when I hear confessions, people tell me, a sin that is really affecting them, It's something that they've done. And I asked them, why? Why did you do that? You see? And I thought, you did what? Why did you do that? That's how important that question is. And asking that question, that why, is listening. Okay, you heard the problem, number one, and now you want to know more. What caused that problem? So you're listening. And guess what the church says is the ultimate form of prayer? Listening. Listening to God in particular, but we also hear God through other people. Okay, that's the beauty of social action. We're not. You said we have 2 more hours, right, Jerry? Catholic. We have 2 hours, but not today. Catholic, how if we are activists, okay, if we are doing social action in the community, if we're in a peaceful protest, or if we're writing a letter to our congressperson, or if we're doing some helping in the food pantry, or gathering clothes to give to migrants like your parish does, don't do it like a social worker. And I'm not putting down social workers, because I'm a social worker too in that sense, okay? But what I mean is, don't do it without a connection to God, to Christ. That's our obligation. That's what differentiates us from everybody else, okay? We have to be doing what we're doing, not only to help that other person, but we have to be doing it because we love God. And God calls us to do this. And we have to be mindful of that. We're doing it for God, through Christ, okay? The Gospels are going through our head, even subconsciously. But that's the difference right there. We always have to have the God question first. And that also, well, why only peaceful protest? Because of God, okay? All right, because of God and God's love, okay? So it always goes back to that as well.
Can you explain what's going on in the legal system, in the immigration courts, and with the additional individuals that have been incarcerated or held in detention? How is that system functioning, and is there anything we can do to help it?
You said we have 3 hours left, right? That whole system, the whole immigration detention and immigration court system is just now. It always was difficult, but relatively predictable, at least from looking back from now. Now it's totally unpredictable, and there's nothing holy about it, okay? The fact that ICE is picking up people when they come out of immigration court. You see, so if people are saying, well, we don't want them here because they're not following the law, well, then why are they coming out of court? They're following the law. They've been doing everything all these years to follow the law. Why are you picking them up and deporting them when they come out of court? You're talking out of both sides of your mouth, okay? And which feeds, the question that Anita had. Why are people angry? Well, okay. And they're doing their job. Yeah. So, we blame them, because how are they doing the arrest? That's another thing. But how do you do that work and not ask yourself the question? Okay. Yep. So there's a lot involved here. your question prompted stuff. Oh, one thing that I hadn't yet mentioned, but I think might be appropriate now. The Diocese of Gaylord has had an hermanamiento. Hard word to translate. It comes from the word for brother, sister. We have a sister relationship with the Diocese of Matagalpa, Nicaragua. Matagalpa, Nicaragua. Google it. And also Google flight or plane, whatever, 222, okay? A plane with 222 prisoners, 10 of which were from Matagalpa, Nicaragua, on a plane on February 9th of 2023. And because of our partnership, I knew those 10. And I knew one of them very well. And I learned of that plane when it was in flight and hadn't yet landed in Washington. Back then, the Biden government brought 222 political prisoners from a torture prison in Managua, Nicaragua, flew them to Washington, D.C., and then I was able to get word to the guy I knew best on the flight, give him my phone number, and he called me, and that's how we made connection. He's now, that guy, is the director of Hispanic Ministry for the Diocese of Gaylord. And his wife, who we also brought in after she had to sneak out of Nicaragua in the middle of the night into Costa Rica, where we had a Catholic nun who I know pick her up with other people. She's now the assistant director of Hispanic Ministry. So I keep telling them they're probably the only Nicaraguan Hispanic ministry directors in the whole country. Because almost all of them are Mexican. And I'm telling you all this because the US government brought the men here, okay? And then the Biden administration created a slot, of immigration law slot for them to come in. And then using that, the Diocese of Gaylord, okay, I did with the permission of my bishop, I did all the paperwork to bring the wife and family, and then there were 3 families and 1 priest, and brought them all in, and tons of paperwork. I could write, there could be a movie about all that happened with those 4 people within a year, particularly their escape from Nicaragua. And now, and they applied for asylum. I did all the paperwork. It's all on hold. I'm talking about the immigration system. It's all stopped. That's never happened before, ever. As my immigration lawyer that I have worked with for 25 years has said, never before in the history of the world has that happened. And they're like frozen. And so these people are afraid. I mean, they came in legally. So again, why don't they follow the law? Well, a lot of people have followed the law. And now the administration has canceled their program. Yeah, they say, well, no, Biden created that. It was wrong. So it's gone. And so their work permits are canceled and they're deportable. I'm not talking about my Nicaraguans with that. I'm talking about the bigger population. But because of that, the Nicaraguans are what's going to happen? Well, we still think everything's going to go forward. But do we know that? Absolutely, for sure, no. But all the signs so far are that it will go forward. We just don't know. And we're in a new territory. So that is what's happening. Everything is being... Jerry, did you?
Some 40 years for an apology to the Japanese, the World War II, when they were put in
Mhm.
detention centers, and Ronald Reagan in the 80s said it's about time we apologize for putting those people in detention centers. And of course, that's kind of time frame. And it's, again, it talks about both sides of the aisle and that stuff. But how does that fit in? Do you think down the road we're going to have somewhere down the road, Executive David FM going, we'll have to apologize for what the heck is going on today?
I would have no way of answering that, but I think that as Catholic Christians, we each need to be learning from history. And if we look at the detention of the Japanese, and thank you for bringing that up, by the way, and how they were treated, we have to look at that and learn from it. And we have to decide, okay, was that right? Was it not right? And if not, why? And then, okay, how do we apply that to what's going on? Okay, that's our job, is to be weighing all of that stuff. And it's hard to do. But remember the bottom line of the Catholic Church: love one another as I have loved you. And look what happened to the love of Jesus. He loved, even in particular in the Gospel of John, he loved to the end. And it's worded that way, and of course it's the English of the original languages, so it gets distorted a bit. But from studying commentaries, even on that sentence, that he loved to the end, it's like it's vague on purpose, because he loved until he was dead. He loved till the end. He loved until he gave himself completely. All right. So you see what, and husbands and wives, a marriage relationship is always very difficult, because you're two complete people, and now the church says, now you are one, and you're like, oh, really? And sacramentally you are, but it takes work. Love takes work. Okay? So now apply that to the border. Okay? It takes work. But how can they be able to? See, there's a lot of moving parts that are out of whack. And we have to always remember, no matter what we do, and the church is saying we have to have laws. We have to control who's coming in. We have to know who's coming in. Right now, and for decades, we didn't know, because there was no way for people to identify themselves. That's the problem. Okay? They have no problem making themselves known. Give me a path. Here's my name. All right? But yeah.
Million people into our country, and we are not protected under any of the rights of our Constitution as non-citizens. What does the church say is the humane thing to do with all these people? We're overrunning our cities.
Well, I have a very different perspective from my work with the immigrant population, and I do need to correct one thing that you said in particular, that they're not protected under the Constitution. That's wrong. They are. Every person who's here is protected. Remember that you've heard of, what about the Catholic teaching of the right to life? The Constitution protects everybody. Okay? It's all people. And every person has, the Catholic Church, even Catholic school, okay? Every child has a right to an education. Every child has a right to education. So we need to, those are good questions. Keep thinking about them from the perspective of what you hear preached in the homilies in your parish, which this one, I presume, and proclaimed in the scriptures, particularly at Mass and what you read, and struggle with those questions from what you hear from Jesus. Jesus is very confrontative, love your enemies. What? I don't want to love my enemy. I don't even want to talk to him. Yeah. So, and there are practical questions. You're raising a practical question. When you say they're overrunning our cities, I strongly disagree. But that's a statement that has no proof. It has no foundation. So we have to be careful when we're making general statements, because this is how I feel. You may feel like there were too many people are coming in. You can feel that way. That's okay. But that doesn't mean it's a proven fact. That's why we want immigration reform, so we know and we control, and people have a path. It's all intended to help that. It's all intended to help that. You do what I recommended before. Do your homework. Go on the website for the USCCB and begin reading, and you'll learn a lot. But you have to do your homework.
Well, I interject one thing. I've had this question come up before on how do we inform our conscience to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the best way I've been able to
Do you want to use the microphone?
our faith, at least from my perspective, should inform our politics.
Right.
And what's happening is our politics are informing our faith.
Right.
If we do that, our God will.
Right. Yep. And I say that in homilies too. For some reason, a lot of people don't want to hear that. But my own experience, my own frustration is big on that point that Father Bob just mentioned, that I experience so many people whose religion is their political party. And so we have a lot of Catholics that are even angrily, energetically promoting policies which the Catholic Church is fighting. And it's on both sides of the aisle. And so thank you for mentioning that, because that's core to not only immigration, but everything else as well, okay? We are not people of the faith of partisan politics, yet we have made ourselves that way. We first have to look at our religion, at our faith teachings, at Catholic social doctrine. How do we apply the gospel to what's happening around us? Catholic social doctrine. That's why we have to read it. That's why we have to study it. And we're never going to know it all, because it's huge. There's a lot out there, okay? But we can begin. And every little step, we're going to grow a lot. But by informing our faith, that's right. What does the church say? Catholic social doctrine will help. And the Catholic social doctrine will not say, in this case, you should do this, 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 this. No, I said earlier, the Catholic Church does not have a list of political policies that should be implemented. Again, that's the job of the laity. That's the job of politicians in particular, and the laity to encourage and help form or promote. But we will find that the Catholic Church gives us, by analyzing Scripture and bringing it to the current policy, okay, what this is happening here, we, the Catholic Church, we, the bishops, we, the Holy Father, there's all different levels of writing, we suggest you here, just look at this Scripture, look at that Scripture. Doesn't that apply here? What should come out of this? Okay, that's how you come to answers to those questions. It's a process, like a good education. I know we have teachers here, right? Yep. And education is a process. and each person, because they have their own human dignity, they have that right and that responsibility to grow in their education and their faith and mature in how to go forward. That's the being an adult. Yeah. Oh,
I have a question. I believe that racism is a huge element in immigration policy and controversy right now. Would you address that?
I believe that racism is a huge issue in immigration policy right now. Yeah, and I mentioned that before, even to the point that the immigration system that we have is racist. Again, going to the question of anger toward law enforcement, they have been given, they've been told, you can stop people for being brown. We've never had that before, okay? You can stop people for being brown or because they're not talking English. You can stop them and ask them for papers. Woof, okay?
Whenever I hear the words, those people are these people, I think we need to question ourselves to ask, is this a way of responding in fear? That we are feeling threatened, and therefore we have divided ourselves from us and those people. So if we feel that, is there a way that we can reach out to individuals who are in a threatened position and befriend them in some way, one person? Because I have found that if I meet someone who is different from me, and I'm very scared, and I even say hello, I find that that changes me.
Yeah.
Might not change them, but it changes me. And then if I reach out further, and then if I begin to reach out to a person in other ways, then I begin to know someone, and know the family, and know the stories, and know the reasons, and what you said drives. That is an entryway to finding out what we really believe and what other people believe. That's just a thought.
I would like to applaud you because you have just gloriously described one of the three pillars of Catholic social doctrine, namely solidarity. Okay? That's what you just described, solidarity. No, Father.
I think it's important, if we want to learn from history, that we remember that virtually every one of us here came from a group that was on the outside, that was rejected. If you were Irish in Boston in the 1850s, if you were Polish in the Midwest in the 1890s, if you were Italian around that same time, why do you think we've got all these ethnic neighborhoods? Because the only way people could be protected
Right.
was to move with other people that were like them. So we started Catholic schools to educate, because nobody would educate the Polish people. So they started them in Detroit. My mother went to one of those schools. Go to Bay City, it's full of them. There's the Irish parish. There's the French parish. It's always been the way. But we don't want to learn from it, right? It's always this group, these new people, they're the ones we got to worry about.
Yep, yep. And that fear that was brought up, a couple of times now, that's big. And in what you just did and what I labeled as solidarity, you were actually referring to fear. And look how common it is. How many times, I know I can name constantly where I might be walking somewhere, I don't know, going into Meyer or whatever, walking downtown Traverse City, whatever, and there'll be somebody coming that I don't know, but they're different, however. So what do I start thinking? It's like, do I really want to keep going here? Or should I talk to them? Or, you see, there's fear. And because they're not what I'm used to or not what I'm expecting. And it's a very daily common occurrence. And if we can overcome that, then we learn more about love, and we learn more about solidarity, and we learn to ask why. Why? Yeah, good stuff here, folks. This is like good stuff.
But we are hearing all the time now on the news and everywhere else, different things that are fomenting fear. They are creating fear intentionally to make that gap between us and them as big as we can, so that them become the enemy and us are the good people. And, you know, it's subtle and not so subtle, and it's happening all the time.
Yes,
24/7.
and I think it's a good thing that we can even identify that we can see that that's happening, that people are trying to play us. And now the question is, how do I respond to that? Okay. So turn off the news. Yeah. So, but yeah. And that's always happened. Even you'll find that in the Bible. Okay. You'll find people manipulating. Look at even in the ancient, Hebrew scriptures, what we commonly call the Old Testament, stories of the prophets, and how many times there would be a confrontation with a lot of false prophets. And they were manipulating the leaders because they didn't want to incur their wrath. Okay, so the false prophet, I will tell the leader what they want to hear, so they will treat me kindly. That's biblical, and that will never go away. But it's worse and worse. But yeah.
We also need to be careful of images that we see on the news. And this has been going on for years because it's to send a certain message. I know that a group of images just came out that were purported to be Portland, and they weren't. They were from like 4 different places and a couple different countries, none of which were Portland. I came from the Flint area, and I can tell you that it was all over national news during the water crisis, how terrible Flint was, and the scene they were showing was from Lebanon. I was like, I know the area.
Yeah.
There's no way to know if anything is still true.
Yep. There's a lot of manipulation, and more than ever with the internet and with AI. Okay. There's a lot of good to all that, but people right away use it for evil. And yeah, so an obvious action thing that I haven't said yet, and what can we do? Never forget to pray. All right, please. Prayer is always necessary. I guess I was assuming that, but it needs to be said because we believe in the power of prayer, and that is an action as well. And well, I don't know how to do justice. I don't know. Pray for justice. Pray for justice. And the scripture tells us over and over again, God will triumph somehow. Through people, through something, God will triumph. But so never forget that part. There was another hand here somewhere. Yeah. Whoops, sorry.
Parables that deal with interactions with outsiders.
Mm.
And how to demonstrate charity and justice.
Yeah, I think a classic example is every time a Samaritan is held up as the example of faith. And that was just done this Sunday, okay? The Samaritan. And today, we're hearing that and we're like, oh, okay, fine. No. If Samaritan was like, they're sick people. They worship in the wrong place. They're wrong. They're just wrong. They don't know what's going on. And they were just a whole different culture. So yeah, we look at those, and when it says he was a Samaritan or she was a Samaritan, dwell on that. And ask yourself, why? Now what? Who would be the Samaritan today? And then how would I deal with them? You see, that's what Scripture is meant to do. That's what Catholic social doctrine is meant to do, is to take what's in the Scripture and apply it to what we see around us out there, all right? And yet even the U.S. bishops formally acknowledge Catholic social doctrine as the best kept secret in the Catholic Church, okay? It shouldn't be that. Yep. I wanted myself to add, I used the word now from the Samaritan, culture. I wanted to mention the word culture, the concept of culture, because we don't realize how vital culture is also to the immigration situation that we have. You know, why don't those people do this? Why don't those people do that? The answer is because in their culture, it doesn't exist. One clear example, working, you know, when I mentioned our Nicaraguan people that we brought, I worked intensively with them, so I used them for a lot of examples. When it came time to study for the driver's license, okay? So we're doing road, you know, we're driving on the road and all that, and I knew I've been to Latin America, a lot of different places, and I knew that in Latin America and some other countries, stoplights and traffic signals are suggestions. If you want to stop on the red light, go for it. And if not, that's okay. And it's true with a lot of other things that, you know, it's like, oh, you can't do that. And a Latin American is like, why? What's the problem? All right? Because in their world, it's not an issue. Another thing with culture is our typical, because, you know, I'm not saying that we're all one culture in the U.S. I'm not saying or implying that. But with our white, our Anglo perspective, when we talk to one another, we're very direct, okay? Okay, I'll call you tomorrow, and it'll be like 9 a.m., and here's the agenda on what we're going to talk about. Point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4. No. No. All right. So, well, when will you call me? Tomorrow. Okay. Morning? Yeah. Okay. And so you see, it's all very, and then even a dialogue. Case in point, I went to Bolivia, I told you, a month ago. And when we went to 2 different coffee cooperatives, I already knew, you know, when we were welcomed regally with, you know, flowers and music and even dancing. I don't want to show you the video of that, but, and then the formal welcome. And what is a formal welcome? It's a big production that just says, we're glad you're here. But it's a big production. And it's like, you know, well, we've been waiting for so long for it to be ready, and we've talked to you, and so we had a meeting yesterday, and we're all just filled with anticipation of our following meeting. You know, after we have lunch, then we'll have our business meeting when we're going to talk about why you're here and how our cooperative is doing. And so we're so looking forward, and we know that you came a long way, and so honors us that you've come from so far, and blah, 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 and you just sit there, and you're remember, because you did not have to answer all that. And so then they finally give me the floor, and then I give my response, you know, trying to cover all the points about, it's a dance. It's a dance, and there's nothing direct. And you don't, you know, so it's a whole way of thinking. Our thinking, Anglo thinking, is like linear. Even, you know, like starting here is linear and it arrives here. But many cultures in the world, including Hispanic cultures, are circular, or they're spiral. Okay, and you have to, you know. An example, my nonprofit got a phone call about a year ago from the Grand Traverse County Sheriff's Department. And a sergeant was on the phone and called the nonprofit because they knew that we speak Spanish and we do interpretation. And they had a Spanish-speaking person in prison for like 3 months. And he only speaks Spanish. And they have a sheriff's deputy who speaks fluent Spanish. That's what this, she speaks fluent Spanish. She cannot communicate with him. Can't communicate. So do you think that I can put you on the phone with him and you might be able to see if you can, because we need to know this, we need to know that, we need to know the other thing. Okay. So I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be a challenge because, you know, they can't talk to him. So I get on the phone, he's from Guatemala, so a native person. So now I know, oh, okay, now I know why they couldn't talk to him. And because they were trying to, you know, tell me this, doesn't make sense. So you have to come in through the back door. So yeah, it wasn't understood. He spoke well, you know, spoke Spanish well. I'm okay, fine. So I made notes. I'm saying then after we were done, I got back on the phone with the sergeant, gave the information, done. Okay. But that's how important culture is. And that is like a huge, huge thing in dealing with people. Our immigration system does not operate that way. The immigration system does not care about culture. So, you know, can it? Yeah, it can, but it doesn't. So keep that in mind. It's a big, big, big ingredient that will serve you well, I think, not only thinking about immigration, but even with communication with one another. Because if you think of it, we all come from a different family and a different background, different history, different part of the country, different jobs, we think differently. So oftentimes we get frustrated with one another, or even husbands and wives, you know, we have a different background. Culture.
Father, I guess if it's 8:30.
Whoa.
If people feel free to leave, they want to leave, go ahead, that's our time.
Okay. Oh. I think now you understand when I said earlier on about the 3-hour thing. You know, the 3 hours goes like nothing. But yeah. So yeah, anybody, you know, again, thank you all for coming. This was a pleasure. I just loved our time together. So don't feel badly if you need to leave. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a good night.